In the year 2398, humanity had conquered the stars, mastering technologies once thought impossible. Still, one mystery remained unsolved: the black holes. The most enigmatic and dangerous of them all was the abyss, a black hole that sat at the heart of the galaxy, its event horizon an impenetrable barrier. No one had ever ventured beyond it, and no one had ever returned. But humanity's thirst for knowledge and discovery had pushed the boundaries too far to turn back. Captain Aurora Hayes stood before the gathered crew in the command center of the ship, Eventide. Her sharp blue eyes scanned the faces of the men and women who had volunteered for this mission, each of them experts in their respective fields. The mission was both a scientific marvel and a desperate gamble. If they succeeded, they would answer questions that had plagued humankind for centuries. If they failed, they would be lost to the depths of the abyss, with no hope of rescue. Hayes, a seasoned leader with a quiet but commanding presence, had faced countless missions before, but this one felt different. Something about the black hole called to her, a deep, inexplicable pull. She had buried any personal thoughts beneath a professional mask, focusing on the enormity of the task at hand. Beside her stood Dr. Ethan Cole, a brilliant astrophysicist known for his work in quantum mechanics. His sharp mind had made him a leading expert in gravitational anomalies, but it was his personal loss that drove him to this mission. Years ago, a cosmic disaster had taken his wife and child, leaving him haunted by the memory of their absence. The chance to unravel the mysteries of the abyss was both an intellectual challenge and a path to healing the wounds that never fully closed. Lyra Voss, the ship's quantum engineer, was the third member of the leadership team. With her auburn hair tied back and her intense green eyes, she had the calm demeanor of someone who was always thinking 2 steps ahead. Lyra had always been the one to find solutions, no matter how impossible the problem seemed. She wasn't just driven by curiosity. She believed that this mission could unlock secrets of the universe itself, secrets that could elevate humanity to a new level of understanding. As the ship prepared for launch, the tension was palpable. The Eventide was a marvel of modern engineering, designed to withstand the gravitational forces of a black hole, or so they believed. But even with the best technology at their disposal, there was no way to predict what awaited them once they crossed the event horizon. The black hole had a way of bending the very fabric of reality. Time, space, and matter all twisted in ways that no one truly understood. "Are we ready?" Hayes asked, her voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. "Almost, Captain," Lyra responded, her fingers flying over the ship's controls. "Just a few final calibrations." "Once we enter, there's no turning back," Dr. Cole said, his voice low. His eyes were focused on the data streaming across the monitors, but there was a weight to his words that made the gravity of the situation sink in even further. Hayes nodded. "I know, but this is the only way to move forward. We've come too far to stop now." With that, the final countdown began. The Eventide slowly began to move, its engines humming to life as they drifted toward the edge of the abyss. The crew had been briefed on the risks. The black hole would tear apart anything that crossed its event horizon, but they had no choice. They had to know what lay within. As the ship hurtled toward the black hole's edge, an eerie calm descended on the crew. They were no longer just explorers. They were pioneers about to cross into the unknown. Hayes took one last look at the stars, knowing that this mission would be their last. Whatever lay ahead, it would be a journey that no one had ever made, and they would either unravel the universe's greatest mystery or disappear into nothingness. As the Eventide approached the event horizon, the immense gravitational forces of the black hole began to pull at the fabric of space-time. The ship shuddered under the strain, its engines working overtime to maintain course. Outside, the stars seemed to stretch and twist, their light distorted as though the universe itself was warping under the intense gravitational field. The crew was silent, each person absorbed in their duties, but a palpable tension filled the command deck. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the room, watching the displays flicker erratically. The deeper they went, the harder it was to keep the ship steady. The navigational systems were beginning to fail, and the laws of physics were becoming less predictable by the second. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Hayes remained focused. There was no turning back now. "Adjusting the shields, Captain," Lyra said, her fingers flying across the controls. "We're getting interference from the gravitational waves. The ship's hull is holding, but we need to be prepared for anything." Hayes nodded grimly, her mind already racing ahead. "Keep me posted. We're entering uncharted territory." Dr. Cole, seated at a nearby console, was lost in thought as he monitored the ship's instruments. His eyes darted across the various data streams, trying to make sense of the increasingly erratic readings. Time dilation was setting in, he knew. The deeper they traveled, the more their perception of time would warp. It was a known effect when crossing the event horizon, but to experience it firsthand was something no one could truly prepare for. "This doesn't make sense," Cole muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What's wrong?" Hayes asked, turning to him. "I'm seeing multiple readings from the same point in space. It's as if time is," he paused, trying to find the right words, "splitting. We're not just moving forward. It's like we're moving in all directions at once, but we shouldn't be able to perceive that. It's not possible." Hayes exchanged a glance with Lyra, whose face was pale, but her eyes were locked on her station, working furiously to stabilize the ship. "Could it be a malfunction?" Lyra asked, her voice tight. "No," Cole replied, his voice a bit sharper. "The instruments are fine. It's the space around us. Something is bending reality." Just then, the ship lurched violently, sending a jolt through the crew. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered as the Eventide was caught in the throes of a massive gravitational wave. The floor tilted, and crew members had to brace themselves against the sudden shift. The controls were becoming erratic, no longer responding to their inputs as they should. "Hold on," Hayes barked, gripping the rail beside her. The ship was barely staying on course, the force pulling them deeper into the abyss with every passing second. Dr. Cole gripped his seat, his knuckles white. "We're slipping into another dimension. The normal rules of physics don't apply here." Lyra was desperately trying to adjust the ship's trajectory, but her hands seemed to move in slow motion, the ship's systems barely responding to her commands. "If we don't regain control..." Before she could finish, the air around them began to distort. The view outside the ship shifted, the stars stretching and warping into long, impossible lines. Then, in an instant, the familiar blackness of the abyss was replaced by a dazzling, surreal landscape, colors and lights they had no words for, shifting and pulsating like living entities. The familiar laws of the universe seemed to be peeling away. "This isn't space anymore," Cole whispered, his voice heavy with awe and fear. "We're not just in a black hole. We're in a place between places." Captain Hayes stared at the display, her mind racing to understand what she was seeing. They had crossed a threshold. There was no denying it now. They were no longer in the galaxy they knew. The Eventide was trapped in a dimension beyond their comprehension. As the crew struggled to comprehend the bizarre reality unfolding before them, the warning signs came all too late. Time itself was shifting around them, and the crew realized with a shock that they had entered the heart of the black hole. Nothing was as it seemed. Nothing would ever be the same. The moment the Eventide crossed deeper into the heart of the black hole, everything changed. Time, space, and even the ship's very structure seemed to bend, pulse, and twist as though they were no longer solid concepts. The crew was no longer moving through space as they understood it. They were drifting in something far more incomprehensible, an otherworldly realm where the laws of physics seemed like distant memories. Dr. Cole's console began to flicker, each readout growing more erratic. His face had paled, and his hands trembled as he tried to interpret the growing chaos of data. "This doesn't make sense," Cole muttered, staring at the screen. The readings were nothing like anything he had ever encountered in his career. The event horizon had distorted everything they knew about the universe. The ship's gravimetric sensors are registering multiple instances of time overlapping. It's like we're experiencing different points in history at once. Lyra turned to look at the readings, her face taut with concern. Multiple instances of time, what does that mean for us? Cole clenched his fists, unable to form a coherent response. It was too much. Every second felt like a collision between past and future, like they were being torn apart at the atomic level. His own memories were starting to blur, like the fabric of his mind was being stretched and distorted. Captain Hayes gripped the command chair, her expression hardening. "We're caught in something more dangerous than we thought. The black hole's effects are warping not just space, but our perception of time. We need to get control of this before we lose ourselves entirely." But the ship was beyond their control. The Eventide shuddered violently again, a tremor running through its hull, and the lights flickered. For a brief moment, the stars outside appeared to warp and twist into grotesque shapes, each one more alien than the last, and then, just as suddenly, they blinked out, replaced by an unnatural emptiness. Captain Hayes exchanged a glance with Lyra. "Something's wrong. We've lost all external comms. It's like the universe is closing in around us." Dr. Cole's face was pale, his eyes wide. "It's not just the ship, it's us. I keep seeing visions, things that haven't happened, things that might never happen." Lyra's jaw tightened. "What kind of visions?" "I keep seeing my family," Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they're not here. They're not in this time. It's like I'm seeing them in another version of the past, one where I never lost them." His voice cracked. "They're trying to communicate with me. Is it possible the black hole is projecting some sort of hallucination?" Lyra asked, though she knew she didn't believe it. The distortion they were experiencing was too real for mere hallucinations. "No," Dr. Cole said, his eyes darting around. "These aren't hallucinations. It's like I'm being pulled into a different timeline. A timeline where events are shifting, where the past isn't fixed." Captain Hayes leaned in. "What does that mean? Are we seeing alternate realities?" "Yes," Cole said, almost to himself. "The black hole, it's like a bridge. It's not just a tear in space, it's a tear in time itself." Lyra took a deep breath, trying to regain control of the situation. "Then we need to stabilize the ship's systems. If we don't, we could lose ourselves in time. If that happens, we'll never be able to get back." A series of loud, mechanical groans shook the ship. Suddenly, the lights dimmed to an eerie twilight. They were not alone. The walls of the ship seemed to ripple, as if they were made of liquid, undulating and breathing with each shift of the gravitational field. In the distance, a voice, a distorted echo, sounded, reverberating through the corridors. It was faint at first, like a whisper, then it grew louder, clearer. "Help! Help us!" Hayes' heart stopped. The voice seemed to come from nowhere, yet everywhere. It was unmistakable. "Who's there?" She shouted into the silence, but the voice remained. Cole's breath quickened. "I heard it too. It's not just a voice. It's like it's from within the ship, or from another version of the ship." Lyra's face hardened. "We're not just seeing multiple timelines. We're hearing them too. This place isn't just warping reality. It's merging it." As the voice grew louder, more desperate, the ship continued its uncontrollable descent. Time was no longer something they could grasp. It was a force, slipping through their fingers as they fell deeper into the black hole's grasp, closer to an uncertain and terrifying truth, one that could change the very fabric of existence. The ship trembled violently as the Eventide systems sputtered and failed, the distorted landscape outside growing increasingly strange. Stars had long since ceased to exist in their familiar patterns. Now, the space before them seemed to writhe, as though the very fabric of the cosmos was alive. The crew was no longer sure where they were. Time no longer flowed in linear fashion, and the boundaries of reality seemed to thin, like the veil between the known universe and something far darker. Dr. Cole's hands were shaking as he tried to stabilize the instruments, but the more he tried, the more the readings became incomprehensible. This can't be happening," he whispered. "It's like we've crossed into a realm that doesn't follow the same rules. There's something here, something that's been watching us." His voice was barely audible over the hum of the failing systems, but Captain Hayes heard the desperation in his tone. She turned toward him, her resolve hardening. "What do you mean, something watching us?" Cole looked up from his console, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's not just the black hole. There's an intelligence here, a presence. It's been here, observing everything, civilizations, races, even us. It's not just gravity that bends here. There's a consciousness, something ancient." Before Hayes could respond, the lights flickered and the ship lurched again. This time, it wasn't just a distortion. It felt like the ship was being drawn towards something massive, a force stronger than anything they had encountered. The walls of the ship groaned under the pressure, and the strange hum in the air grew louder. Then the voice came again, this time clearer, more deliberate, resonating not from the ship's systems, but from deep within the very heart of the black hole. "You are not the first to come," it said, its tone both soothing and terrifying. "Nor shall you be the last." Hayes gripped the edge of the command chair, her body rigid with tension. "Who are you?" The voice seemed to laugh, but it was not a sound, not a laugh at all. It was more like an idea conveyed through the vibrations of the air. "I am the Watcher. I have seen worlds rise and fall, watched the birth of stars and the death of empires. And you are here because you sought answers. Answers you are not ready for." For a moment, there was silence. Then a massive, shuddering force pulled the ship forward, pulling it deeper into the black hole's maw. The crew scrambled to maintain their footing, as the walls seemed to ripple with an eerie, liquid-like movement. The ship was no longer traveling through space in the way they understood. They were being pulled toward something that defied every law they had ever known. Through the distorted viewports, the crew saw something ahead, a massive presence, an entity that seemed to exist in multiple forms at once. It was everywhere and nowhere, a shifting, pulsating shape too vast and complex to be contained by the dimensions they knew. It was both a being and a concept, its presence overwhelming in its enormity. The Watcher. "I have waited long for you," the voice continued, reverberating through the ship. "For eons, I have observed the actions of your species, of all species that have ventured into my domain. You are not the first to seek me, but you may be the last." The crew stared in awe and horror, realizing that they were in the presence of something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. The ship lurched again, its systems failing, yet there was a strange calmness in the air, as if the Watcher had already anticipated their arrival. "Why are you doing this?" Captain Hayes demanded, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "What do you want from us?" The Watcher's voice echoed once more, the tone shifting from enigmatic to something darker, more foreboding. "What I want is not for you to understand. What I offer, however, is clear: knowledge, power, transcendence, or oblivion." Dr. Cole, trembling, spoke up. "What does that mean? What do you want from us?" The Watcher's form seemed to shift, as if amused by the question. "I do not want anything. I am not a being of desire, only of observation. I have seen your species' potential, and I have watched as you flounder and strive. But here, in my domain, your choices matter little. You are caught in the web of time, now forced to confront what you have always sought, the answers to your greatest questions, and I can give them to you, at a price." Captain Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. A price. The Watcher's presence filled the space, its form folding and unfolding, as if it were made of shifting light and shadow. The price of knowing the truth is the sacrifice of all that you are. What you are willing to give up defines what you can gain. Will you sacrifice your humanity to gain the wisdom of the cosmos, or will you return empty, knowing what could have been? The air around them grew thick, heavy with the weight of the Watcher's words. Time itself seemed to slow as the crew absorbed the enormity of what lay before them. They were standing at the edge of something unimaginable, and the choice before them, accept the Watcher's offer or face something far worse, was all-consuming. The very future of humanity hung in the balance, and they had no idea what to do next. The crew stood frozen, their minds overwhelmed by the enormity of the decision before them. The Watcher's presence loomed over them, not just in the ship but in their very thoughts. It was as though they were standing before the very essence of time and existence, confronted by a being so ancient, so vast, that their understanding of the universe felt insignificant in comparison. Captain Hayes gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but she refused to show any sign of doubt. The lives of her crew, the future of humanity, and the mysteries of the universe all hung in the balance. If they chose to accept the Watcher's offer, they would gain knowledge and power that could change everything. Humanity could transcend its limitations. But if they refused, they might never return. Worse, they might never understand the full implications of what they were facing. She turned to her crew. Lyra Voss, always the pragmatic one, was the first to speak. Her face was pale, her usually steady hands now trembling. "If we accept, what happens to us, to who we are?" Lyra asked, her voice strained. Dr. Cole, still haunted by the visions he had seen in the black hole's strange realm, glanced up at the Watcher, his eyes full of a mixture of awe and fear. I've already seen what the Watcher offers, the knowledge, the potential to see the universe as it really is, he said, his voice distant. But it comes at a cost. What if we're no longer human after this? What if we lose everything that makes us, us? Captain Hayes glanced at him, feeling the pull of the Watcher's offer, the temptation to know everything, to understand the mysteries of the cosmos was powerful. It was a siren song that resonated deep within her, calling her to take the leap. But at what cost? "We don't know what we'd be sacrificing if we accept," Hayes said quietly, looking each crew member in the eye. "What if we lose ourselves in the process? What if we become something else entirely? Will we still be able to return?" The Watcher's voice echoed, seemingly responding to her unspoken thoughts. "There is no return once you step across the threshold. You'll either evolve into something greater, or you will cease to be as you are." Hayes swallowed, her throat dry. She could feel the tension in the air, thick with the weight of the decision. The crew was on the edge, and any move, any choice, could lead to an irreversible consequence. "What is it you want from us?" she asked, her voice firm. "Why offer us this choice if you don't have a purpose in mind?" The Watcher's form seemed to ripple in response, as though amused. "I do not want anything. I exist only to observe. But you, your species, have something I have never seen before, a unique potential. You could be more than you are if you are willing to surrender what you know. Knowledge is a burden as much as it is a gift. Will you accept both?" Hayes thought of her crew, of Lyra's ingenuity, of Cole's intellect, of the sacrifices they had all made to reach this point. Were they truly ready for the unknown? Could humanity bear the weight of knowledge that the Watcher promised, knowing that once they crossed the line, there would be no turning back? "I can't speak for all of us," Hayes said slowly, looking around at her crew. "But if we accept, it's not just for power. It's for the future of humanity. We've always sought answers. Maybe now we can find them. Maybe we can evolve beyond what we are." Lyra's eyes softened, and she nodded. "I don't know if we're ready for this, but I've always believed that humanity's greatest strength is its capacity for change. If there's a chance to become more, to understand more, then I think we have to take it." The moment the crew uttered their acceptance, The fabric of reality itself seemed to tear. The ship lurched violently as if it were being ripped apart by unseen hands, the walls shaking, groaning under pressure far beyond their design. The Evantide's hull creaked, and then, with a sudden, deafening sound, everything shattered. Time bent and snapped, space folding in on itself as though the universe was unraveling at the seams. Captain Hayes was thrown from her chair, the force of the shift knocking her to the ground. The ship, its systems now completely out of control, spiraled into a vortex of chaos. Outside the viewports, the black hole's once calm surface became a swirling maelstrom, its gravity pulling at the very essence of the ship's existence. "Captain." Lyra's voice cut through the madness, but it sounded distant, as though she were calling from another dimension. Hayes struggled to regain her footing, her head spinning, her vision blurry. Cole was at the console, his face pale and drawn, his eyes wide in a mixture of fear and awe. "It's happening," he said, his voice a hollow whisper. "We're being transformed." Before Hayes could respond, the ship lurched again, and for a brief moment, everything went still. Time, space, and sound seemed to vanish, leaving only the eerie silence of the void. Then the voice came again, the Watcher's voice, not from the ship's speakers, but from the very air around them. "Your evolution begins now. What you are, and what you will become, will no longer be bound by the limits you once knew." The words sent a chill through Hayes' spine. The Watcher was not just observing, it was guiding them into something far beyond their comprehension. She could feel it, the tug, the pull, a force greater than any physical law they had ever known. Reality itself seemed to bend, to warp and ripple around them. In the silence, the crew watched as the world outside the ship's windows began to break apart. The stars, once fixed and certain, were now liquid, shifting, flowing, merging into new shapes, new patterns that defied all logic. The black hole that had once seemed like an enemy was now something else entirely. It was not a place, it was a door, a threshold to another plane of existence. The walls of the ship trembled again, this time not with fear, but with the weight of something far greater. They were no longer simply drifting in the black hole's gravity. They were inside it, part of something else entirely. The ship's metal walls began to twist and deform, as though they too were being reconfigured by the new forces at play. Hayes struggled to stay calm as she clutched the edge of her seat. We're becoming part of this," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's not just knowledge, it's change." Dr. Cole nodded, his eyes distant, his mind seemingly lost to the overwhelming shift happening inside him. "We're being altered. The Watcher wasn't lying. We're merging with the black hole. We're becoming something else." The view outside grew even more disorienting. The stars no longer existed in their familiar positions. Instead, they were splintering, breaking apart and reforming into intricate alien patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. Reality itself had become a fluid thing, and the crew felt their perceptions of time and space collapse. Lyra's voice was faint, as if coming from the farthest reaches of their understanding. "What if we can't return? What if we lose ourselves completely?" Cole's eyes were wide, his body trembling as the transformation took root. "I don't think we can go back, Lyra. We've passed the point of no return. The Watcher gave us the choice to evolve, to transcend what we were. We can't go back to being human." Hayes closed her eyes, her mind racing. They had asked for this. They had reached for the unknown, for knowledge and power beyond their wildest imaginations. But the price was higher than they had ever expected. They were not just learning from the Watcher, they were becoming part of it. The boundaries of their humanity were slipping away, fading into the vast, incomprehensible expanse of what lay beyond the event horizon. In that moment, the truth became clear: there was no going back. The Watcher had promised them transcendence, but it had also promised them the shattering of everything they knew. Time, space, identity, it was all dissolving into a new reality. The crew of the Eventide had crossed the threshold, And now they would become something else, something new, something unimaginable. The ship, now a mere extension of their fractured existence, drifted deeper into the black hole, leaving behind the remnants of their former selves. There would be no return. The universe they had once known was slipping away, and they were becoming part of something much greater, something that defied comprehension. The Watcher had kept its word. The final evolution had begun.